10 years in a brand new Toyota, the most reliable mainstream vehicle you can buy in this country, will cost you somewhere around $74,000. And over the next half hour, I'm going to walk you through every single line of that number until there is nothing left to argue about. Not the sticker, not the payment, the whole thing. Cash out of your pocket. From the day you sign to the day you hand somebody else the keys. I've had more of these apart than I care to count, and I've watched more owners sign the paperwork than that. And the thing that gets me every time isn't that the number is big. It's that almost nobody who buys a car has ever seen it written down in one place. You get shown a monthly payment. You get shown a fuel economy sticker. You get shown a warranty booklet with a nice cover. 6 separate costs, 6 separate people collecting, and not one of them has any reason to hand you the total. So let's build it. I'm using a 2026 RAV4 as the example because it's the best-selling small SUV in America, and because the base LE now stickers at $33,350 with destination included. 10 years, 120,000 miles, financed like most people finance, insured like most people insure. Every figure I use, I'll tell you where it came from. 3 things to flag before we start. The single biggest line in that 74,000 isn't fuel, and it isn't repairs. It's a line you will never write a check for, never see on a bill, and never feel leaving your account. And it is larger than every repair, every tire, and every oil change you will make on that vehicle combined. We get to it first. The second biggest is a bill you already pay and probably can't quote from memory within $400. And there is a service sitting on dealer menus all over the country running about $300 that appears nowhere in Toyota's own maintenance book. When we get there, I'll also tell you about the pickup owner who was quoted a flush for a fluid his truck does not contain. Here's the misconception the whole thing rests on, and if you don't take this one on board, the rest of the arithmetic won't land properly. People buy a Toyota to control what a vehicle costs them. That's the reasoning, and it's not stupid. It's just aimed at the wrong target. Buying reliability controls your repair bill. Only your repair bill. And your repair bill, I'm going to show you this with real figures, is the 4th largest line in 10 years of ownership. Not the first, 4th. It's the one you can see, the one you feel clever about, the one you brag about at work when somebody else's transmission goes. And it's the small one. You're arguing about the price of the nails while somebody else quietly bills you for the scaffolding. The reliability advantage is real, by the way. I want to be straight about that before I start taking the number apart. RepairPal, which tracks actual shop visits across millions of vehicles, puts the average annual repair and maintenance cost across all Toyota models at $441 against $652 for the industry. And the average Toyota goes in for unscheduled work about 0.3 of a time a year versus 0.4 across everything else. That's a genuine engineering achievement. Timing chains instead of belts. Naturally aspirated or lightly loaded engines where everybody else went small and boosted. Somebody in Aichi made a series of unglamorous decisions, and you're the beneficiary. By the way, if you drive a Toyota and want to keep it running for hundreds of thousands of miles, what you do before something breaks matters far more than most owners realize. That's why I put together the 500K Mile Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your Toyota last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot mechanic upsells that quietly drain your wallet. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera, or grab it from the first pinned comment below. But the money doesn't care how good the engine is. There are 6 lines in 10 years of ownership, and the engine only touches one of them. The old hands in the trade have always known this, and they say it in a way that sounds like a joke until you do the math. Nobody ever went broke on repairs. They went broke on the payment, the insurance, and the trade-in. Cars don't ruin people at the shop counter. They ruin people quietly, monthly, in ways that never generate a receipt you'd think to keep. 6 lines. Let's do them in order of size, which is not the order anybody talks about them. Depreciation, the biggest single cost of owning a vehicle, and the only one that never sends you an invoice. Here's the mechanism, plainly. The moment that RAV4 leaves the lot, it stops being a new vehicle and becomes a used one. And there is a permanent structural discount attached to that word that has nothing to do with anything mechanical. Nothing wore out. Nothing failed. The market simply reprices you, and it reprices you hardest at the start. IC Cars, which analyzed north of 15 million vehicles to build its depreciation data, puts the RAV4 at about 25% lost after 5 years, against roughly 42% across all vehicles. Push it to 10 years, and the RAV4 lands at 54%. On a $33,000 purchase, that's $18,000 gone. Now, sources disagree here, and I want to be honest about how much. CarEdge runs the RAV4 closer to 28% at 5 years. Kelley Blue Book's cost to own tool has been showing figures for recent model years that imply a steeper early drop than either. 3 respectable outfits, 3 different answers, because they're measuring slightly different things. Some working from asking prices, some from actual transactions, some assuming 13,500 miles a year, and some 15. I took the 10-year figure because it's the time frame we're actually discussing. $18,000. Let that sit against the repair figure for a second. Even if that RAV4 needed a genuinely bad year in the shop, a real one, an unexpected $2,000 year, you'd have to have 9 of them back to back to match what the vehicle loses just by existing. And this is exactly where Toyota's reputation is earning you actual money. Compact SUVs as a class lose about 40% in 5 years. All SUVs, roughly 45. The RAV4 is losing considerably less than either, for a reason that's genuinely mechanical. The used market has watched these things run to 200,000 miles for 30 years, and it prices a Toyota with 60,000 on it as a vehicle with most of its life still in front of it. That reputation was earned in service bays, not in advertising, and it converts directly into dollars in your pocket on the day you sell. So, $18,000, line 1. You never wrote a check. And it dwarfs everything mechanical that will ever happen to that vehicle. Insurance. Second biggest line, and the one that surprises people most when they finally add it up. The national average for full coverage in 2026 runs right around $2,500 a year, according to Value Penguin's analysis. Insurance.com puts it slightly higher, Insurify slightly lower, Experian higher again. Call it $2,300 to be conservative and to account for the fact that your premium does ease somewhat as the vehicle ages and you eventually drop collision. 10 years of that is $23,000. Read that again, because it's the part that stops people. Over a decade, you are likely to spend more insuring the RAV4 than the RAV4 loses in value, more than you spend on fuel and maintenance put together. And unlike depreciation, this one does hit your account, every month, in an amount most people couldn't name to the nearest few $100s if you asked them cold. What happened here is worth understanding because it wasn't always this bad. Premiums went up 11.5% in 2023, 17% in 2024, another 7.5% in 2025. 3 years that produced the steepest sustained run-up in car insurance in about 50 years. And the cause is sitting in your bumper. A modern crossover fender bender doesn't just bend metal anymore. It takes out a radar module, a camera, a set of parking sensors, and then requires a calibration procedure afterward before the safety systems can be trusted again. Repair severity went up because vehicles got smarter. Your premium followed. The good news, such as it is, 2026 looks like the flattest year in a while, with the national average projected to move less than 1%. I'll be upfront about where my standing runs out. I can read a repair estimate and tell you whether it's honest. I cannot read an actuarial table and tell you why the same driver with the same record pays $128 a month in Vermont and $335 in Nevada. I know it's true, and I know the usual explanations: litigation environment, theft rates, uninsured drivers, density. I don't know how those weights are actually set inside a rating model, and I'm not going to pretend I do. What I can tell you is the practical part. This line is the single most negotiable one in the whole 10-year total, and almost nobody negotiates it. It's the one where an afternoon of phone calls moves real money. Third line, and this one's clean arithmetic. The 2026 RAV4 is hybrid only across the whole lineup now, and the base front drive version is estimated at 44 miles per gallon combined. 120,000 miles at that rate is about 2,700 gallons. Using the average pump price AAA built its most recent driving cost study around, that's roughly $8,600 over the decade. Compare that to the gas-only compact SUV it replaced, running around 30 miles per gallon, 4,000 gallons, about $12,600. $4,000 of difference, and no plug, no charging stop, no range anxiety, no behavior change on your part whatsoever. The honest caveat, because there always is one. That saving only shows up if you actually drive the miles. Toyota's hybrid system earns most of its advantage in stop-and-go work, where the engine shuts off and the electric side does the low-speed pulling. If you drive 6,000 miles a year, most of it at 70 on the interstate, the gap narrows considerably. Hybrids reward commuters and errand runners. They're merely fine for people who mostly drive highway. And a small mechanical note that's worth more than it sounds. The regenerative braking on these is doing a large share of your slowing down, which means the friction brakes barely work for a living. I've pulled pads off high-mileage hybrids that looked nearly new. That shows up later as real money. Fourth line. This is the one where the industry is currently doing the most damage, and it's got nothing to do with cars at all. Finance 30,000 of that RAV4 at 7%, roughly where Edmunds had the average new car rate this summer, over 72 months, and your payment is about $511. Over the life of that loan, you hand the bank around $6,800 for the privilege. That's my arithmetic on published averages, not a study, so treat it as an illustration rather than gospel. $6,800. That's a set of tires, a hybrid battery, and every oil change for a decade, paid to somebody who never touched the vehicle. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. A record 23% of financed new car purchases in the first quarter of this year were on loans of 84 months or longer, 7 years. A decade ago, that figure was 10%. Edmunds ran the illustration themselves on the average amount financed, about $44,000 at just under 7%, stretched across 84 months. And the interest alone comes to more than $11,500. Then it compounds in the ugliest sense. Nearly 30% of trade-ins toward new vehicles this year carried negative equity. The owner owed more than the vehicle was worth. Average shortfall, just under $7,000. Roll that into the next loan, and the projected interest over that loan's life climbs past $16,000, about $6,500 more than the ordinary buyer pays. The average monthly payment in that group hit $944. None of that is a Toyota problem. That's a term length problem, and it is entirely within your control. 7-year loans exist because a long enough term makes any payment look reasonable, and a reasonable-looking payment sells vehicles. The vehicle doesn't get cheaper. The clock just gets longer. You're most of the way through the expensive half of this, and the remaining lines are the ones you actually have hands-on control over. If you're finding this worth your time, subscribe. It's the only thing I ask for, and it takes a second, because the next line is the one dealers make their real money on, and I still owe you the $300 service that appears nowhere in Toyota's own book. Right. Line 5, and this is the longest section because it's the one where knowing what you're doing actually changes the total. Toyota runs a fixed interval schedule. No algorithm guessing at your oil life. The maintenance light is a mileage counter you reset. The structure is 5,000-mile checkpoints with individual items running on their own clocks inside that framework. Oil and filter at 10,000 miles or 12 months on the current specification, cut to 5,000 under the listed severe conditions. Tire rotation and brake inspection every 5. Engine and cabin air filters at 30. First coolant change at 100,000 miles, then every 50 after that. Iridium spark plugs at 120,000. On the hybrids, inverter coolant at 150,000. Timing chain. No scheduled replacement at all, because it's designed to outlive the interval sheet. Look at that list and notice what isn't on it. Over the entire first 120,000 miles, the scheduled work amounts to a dozen oil changes, a handful of filters, 1 coolant service, and 1 set of plugs. That's it. That is the actual factory requirement. Priced sensibly at an independent shop, or in your own driveway with a drain pan. All of it comes to somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 across 10 years. The wear items are where the real money is, and they're not on the schedule because they don't run on a schedule. They run on how you drive. Tires first, because tires are the one everybody underestimates. A RAV4 size tire, decent quality, mounted and balanced with the disposal fee and the road hazard nonsense included, runs somewhere in the $800 to $1,200 range for a set of 4. And that's a range rather than a figure, because it swings hard by brand, by market, and by whether you're buying a highway all season or something with actual snow capability. Over 120,000 miles, you're buying 2 sets minimum, 3 if you're rough on them or you rotate late. Call it $2,000 to $3,000. And that single line is bigger than every oil change you'll ever pay for. Brakes next. And here's where the hybrid pays you back a second time. RepairPal's national figures put pads and rotors together at $900 to $1,084 per axle, which is a dealer-weighted number and frankly, a shocking one. Independent shops commonly run 250 to 500 per axle for the same work. On a hybrid with regenerative braking doing most of the slowing, one full round of pads and rotors, front and rear, over 120,000 miles is realistic, with a second front set toward the end. $1,200, give or take, if you're not going to the dealer for it. Then the odds and ends nobody budgets. Two 12-volt batteries over a decade. Wiper blades. A cabin filter you'll forget until the air conditioning smells like a wet basement. Brake fluid, which Toyota doesn't put on a hard interval, but which absorbs moisture out of the air whether anyone schedules it or not. And which I'd flush every 3 years on principle. Add $500 to $800 of miscellaneous across 10 years, and you won't be far off. Total that up, and I land around $8,500 for scheduled maintenance, tires, brakes, and wear over 10 years. Now, RepairPal says the average Toyota costs $441 a year, which would be $4,400 over a decade. That's about half my figure. I've thought about that gap, and I'll tell you where I come down. Their number is built primarily around shop visits, and I don't believe it fully absorbs 2 or 3 sets of tires and a proper brake job at retail prices. I could be wrong about their methodology, but I've paid for enough tires to know that $8,500 is the number that survives contact with an actual driveway, so that's what I'm using. And now you know exactly why. 6th line, and it's short because it's mostly out of your hands. Sales tax at purchase, title, registration, and then whatever your state charges you every year afterward to keep the plates current. 8A's national figure for licensing, registration, and taxes runs $813 a year, though that spreads the upfront purchase taxes across the study period. The spread here is brutal and entirely geographic. Some states take nothing on the purchase and charge you $60 a year for plates. Others take 6 or 7% upfront and then levy an annual personal property tax on the vehicle's assessed value on top, which can run into 4 figures every single year on a newer car. If you live in one of those states, you already know it, and you already know it's the reason your neighbor across the state line pays less for the same vehicle. Budget $3,000 to $4,000 over the decade and check your own state, because this is the one line where a national average tells you almost nothing useful. Let's put it together. Out the door on that RAV4 with tax and the national average documentation fee, call it $36,500. Interest, $6,800. Insurance, $23,000. Fuel, $8,600. Maintenance, tires, and wear, $8,500. Taxes and registration, $3,500. A modest allowance for unscheduled repairs beyond warranty, $2,500, because it's a Toyota and not a lottery ticket. $89,400 of cash leaving your hands over 10 years. Then you sell it. 54% depreciation on a $33,000 vehicle leaves you around $15,300 coming back. Net cost of 10 years, about $74,000. $7,400 a year, around $615 a month, every month, for a decade, just under 62 cents for every mile you drove. And here's the thing I want you to sit with. That is the good outcome. AA's most recent study put the average cost of owning and operating a new vehicle at $11,577 a year across the market. Our RAV4 comes in thousands below that. You did well. You bought the sensible thing, you kept it a decade, you didn't trade at year 4, and it still cost you $74,000. A few items now that live outside the schedule and outside most people's planning. The hybrid battery. Toyota covers it for 10 years or 150,000 miles from first use, up from 800,000 on anything built before 2020. And that's genuinely class-leading coverage. But read the shape of it. On our 120,000-mile 10-year example, you cross the finish line right about the time the coverage expires. Out of warranty at a dealer, a Prius pack currently runs $3,500 to over $5,000 installed. The reconditioning outfits will do it in the $1,300 to $2,000 range. Most owners never need it. These packs routinely go well past 200,000 miles. But the possibility exists at exactly the moment the paperwork stops protecting you, the transmission fluid. Toyota's world standard fluid was introduced with no service interval under normal use, no dipstick, and a refill plug instead of a filler tube. The company has never, as far as I can find, published a clear technical explanation of why a fluid full of friction modifiers is expected to last indefinitely when every other fluid in the vehicle isn't. I'm not going to invent a reason for them. What I'll tell you is what I've seen. The first symptom of tired fluid in these is a faint shudder at torque converter lockup, usually when it's hot. And every experienced hand I know does a drain and fill somewhere around 60 to 80,000 miles, regardless of what the book says. It's $150 against a transmission. That's my judgment, not Toyota's instruction, and I'm marking it clearly as mine. And the small one that catches people, Toyota Care covers your scheduled maintenance for 2 years, or 25,000 miles. That's genuinely free work, and you should use every visit of it. It is also the exact window during which you get accustomed to walking into a dealership service department and not thinking about the price. Then the free part ends, and the habit doesn't. Which brings us to it. Here's what happens the first time you go in after Toyota Care runs out. You're handed a printed sheet, not the warranty and maintenance guide from your glove box, a different document produced by the dealership, formatted to look official, with your mileage at the top and a list of recommended services underneath. And the person handing it to you is the same person whose compensation depends on how much of that sheet you approve. That is the whole trick. Read it again slowly. The party diagnosing what your vehicle needs is the party selling you what your vehicle needs. Nowhere else in your life would you tolerate that arrangement without flinching. So let's compare that sheet to Toyota's actual book. A RAV4 owner reported being quoted $174 for a fuel injection service. Another was quoted $360 for a 3-way fuel injection and air induction package. There is no scheduled fuel induction service in Toyota's maintenance guide. Not at $30,000, not at $60,000, not ever. Modern gasoline carries detergent packages designed to do that job continuously. And unless your vehicle has an actual symptom, a rough idle, a long crank, a code, a fuel trim reading that's drifted, you are being sold a cleaning for a condition nobody demonstrated you have. And then there's the one I keep coming back to. A 2022 Tacoma owner was handed a sheet totaling $3,325. $250 for a pair of air filters that cost $30 apiece. $84 to clean the battery terminals. That's baking soda and a wire brush. And a power steering flush on a truck with electric power steering. There is no power steering fluid in that vehicle. There is no reservoir. There is nothing to flush. Nobody looked. The line was on the menu, so the line went on the sheet. Now the part that makes it work, and this is the sentence I actually want you to carry out of here. When you hesitate, you get told, sometimes directly, more often just implied with a certain tone, that skipping it puts your warranty at risk. That is false, and it has been false since 1975. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act makes it illegal for a manufacturer or dealer to condition your warranty on using their service department or their branded parts, unless they're giving you those parts and that service free. They can require you to follow the maintenance schedule. They can require you to produce receipts showing you did. They cannot require that the receipts come from them. And if they want to deny a specific claim over work somebody else did, the burden is on them to prove that specific work caused that specific failure, not on you. 50 years old, that law. Half a century, and the misconception is still doing productive work at service counters every single day. I'm not going to tell you this is a conspiracy because it isn't, and the truth is more useful. New vehicle margins have been squeezed flat. The service department pays for the building now, the lights, the lot, the salaries. Advisors are frequently compensated on what they sell. Put those three facts in a room together and the printed sheet writes itself. No villain required. Just an incentive structure with your wallet at the end of it. You're not going to fix that, but you can end it at your own counter permanently with one question, and it's a polite one. Show me where this is in the maintenance guide. That's it. Not an argument. Not a lecture about a federal statute. Just a request to point at the page. Legitimate scheduled work is in that book, and an honest advisor will find it in about 8 seconds and be glad you asked. Everything that isn't in the book either has a real diagnosis behind it. A code, a measurement, a symptom you already noticed. Or it has nothing behind it at all. And the difference becomes obvious the moment somebody has to justify it out loud instead of printing it. Ask that question twice at the same dealership, and you stop getting the sheet. The menu is aimed at people who won't ask, because those are the only people it works on. It costs nothing to remove yourself from that category. I've been doing this long enough to notice something about the people who end up spending the least on their vehicles, and it isn't that they're cheap. Some of them buy nicer things than I do. It's that they understand what they own, not in a technical sense necessarily. Plenty of them have never had a wrench in their hands. They just know where their money is going and roughly why. They know what the plates cost. They know their premium without looking it up. They know their oil interval because they read it, not because a light told them. And that knowledge does something that has very little to do with cars. It makes you hard to work on. What I find genuinely satisfying about a vehicle like the RAV4 is that Toyota built a machine that rewards understanding rather than punishing it. Fixed intervals you can read. A timing chain instead of a belt with a clock on it. A schedule short enough to fit on one page. Somebody in that engineering department decided that a well-informed owner should be able to keep this thing running cheaply for 200,000 miles, and then built accordingly. That's a moral position expressed in hardware, and I respect it. The gap between what that vehicle costs to own well and what it costs to own passively is somewhere north of $10,000 over a decade. Same vehicle, same driveway. The only variable is whether you ever added it up. Here's the whole thing as a procedure, not rules of thumb, steps you can run on your own numbers tonight. First, find the 4 figures you probably can't quote. Your annual insurance premium, your annual registration and any personal property tax, your interest rate and remaining term, your actual miles per year off the odometer, not your estimate. Write them on one piece of paper. Most people have never seen those 4 numbers in the same place, and just putting them there changes how you think about the vehicle. Second, deal with insurance, because it's the second largest line and the most negotiable. Get 3 quotes for identical coverage. Do it in an afternoon. If the vehicle is past year 7 and worth under about $4,000, run the collision and comprehensive question honestly. If the annual premium for that portion exceeds roughly 10% of what the car is worth, you're insuring a loss you could absorb yourself. That's arithmetic, not advice. Do it with your own 2 numbers and the answer comes out on its own. Third, term over payment, forever. If a finance office solves an affordability problem by extending the term, the problem wasn't solved, it was postponed with a fee attached. 60 months maximum. If 60 doesn't work, the vehicle is the wrong vehicle. And that's a much cheaper thing to discover in the chair than in year 6 with negative equity. Fourth, get the maintenance guide out of the glove box and read the whole thing once. It takes 20 minutes. Then use 1 line of defense at every service visit for the next 10 years. Show me where this is in the guide. Fifth, find an independent shop before you need one. Not during a breakdown, while everything's fine, on a routine oil change, so you can watch how they handle something small. Sixth, on tires. Buy the middle of the market and rotate every 5,000 miles without exception. Rotation is the cheapest thing on the entire schedule, and it's the difference between 2 sets and 3 over 120,000 miles. That single habit is worth about $1,000. Seventh, keep every receipt in the glove box. Paper, not a folder on your phone. It's your legal protection and your resale documentation, and a stack of receipts in the door pocket has closed more private sales at asking price than any detail job ever has. And eighth, the one that outweighs the other 7 combined, keep it. Every year past, the loan is a year of near zero depreciation and no payment, which is the only stretch of ownership where a vehicle is genuinely cheap. Years 11 through 15 on a Toyota that's been maintained honestly might cost you $2,500 a year all in. Trading at year 5 hands the steepest part of the depreciation curve back to somebody else and restarts your clock at the top of it. So picture a Tuesday about 11 years from now. Somebody at work is explaining their $900 payment and the 84 months they signed for and the negative equity they rolled in from the last one. And you're standing there with a paid-off vehicle in the lot with $140,000 on it that started this morning without being asked, and the only cost it's going to generate this year is a set of tires and an oil change you'll do yourself on Saturday. You won't say anything because there's nothing to gain by saying it, but you'll know what that quiet is worth because you added it up once, years ago, and you never had to do it again. I want the high mileage people in the comments, and I want specifics. If you've got a Toyota past 150,000 miles, tell me the model, the year, the mileage, and the single most expensive thing that's gone wrong, plus what you paid and whether the shop or the dealer did the work. That's the data set I actually trust, more than any national average I quoted today, because it comes from people who paid the bill themselves and remember exactly what it was. And if your answer is nothing significant has gone wrong, say that too, because there are people reading who need to see it. And a second one, for anybody who's been handed one of those printed sheets, what was on yours that shouldn't have been? I'll take the power steering flush on the electric steering truck as the current record holder, but I have a feeling somebody out there can beat it. I read the replies, not skim them. Read them. Some of the best things I know about these vehicles came from somebody in a comment section who'd done the thing I'd only theorized about, and quite a few of them corrected me in the process. That's a fair trade as far as I'm concerned. If you got something out of this, subscribing is the only thing I'll ask you for, and I'll tell you what I'm chasing next. That transmission fluid question has been bothering me for years. A sealed fluid with no interval and no dipstick, in a unit that costs $4,000 to replace. There's a real engineering answer in there somewhere about friction modifier depletion rates and what actually happens inside a torque converter at lockup. And I don't have it to my own satisfaction yet. I've got a couple of leads. When I've got it properly nailed down, it'll be here. $74,000 over 10 years. On the sensible choice, done well. It's a real number, and now it's yours. Go find your 4 figures and put them on one piece of paper. Take care of the machine, and it'll take care of you.